co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Sheri Jacobs, and we're going to be talking about her book, The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, Rethinking the Rules, Risks, and Real Drivers of Innovation. Sheri, thank you so much for coming on today. Where can people find you?
You'll need to unlock your iPhone
thank
first.
you. Thank you for having me, Tim.
Sorry about that. Sheri seemed to think that she was being interviewed.
That's right. And that happens every time to me when I'm on a call. So people can find me at sherijacobs.com or at LinkedIn and find me at Sheri Jacobs on both places.
Excellent. Love the book. There's some really great things I want to pull out in the questions on the book. What was the inspiration behind it?
Well, there were a couple of things that happened all at once. It just kind of came together. I have a background as a photojournalist and as a photographer. I own a research company. So for the last 16 years, I have surveyed 500,000 people. And I started seeing these patterns that kept coming up. And they were counterintuitive. They were the opposite of what we hear every time we walk into a meeting, which is somebody will say, when we feel stuck, folks, let's think outside the box. And people would just stay with what they know because they didn't know how far they can go, what risks they could take. And as I started hearing this in the research that I did, and I started experiencing it as a wildlife photographer, this all came together. And I decided I needed to put out a book that gave people an alternative to thinking outside the box and a way to really solve the problems that made sense in a way we think about risk and how we could take tiny experiments to try new things.
I had a real aha moment when I was reading it when you tell the story about the not thinking outside the box, because I've worked for I've worked for 30 years and we've always been thinking outside the box. So my first question is, Sheri, for decades, leaders have repeated the mantra of thinking outside the box. Your book essentially says we need to focus on where the box ends. Why has business been wrong for so long about total creative freedom?
Yeah, I think that there is this belief that creativity and unlimited freedom go together, when instead it's actually what I've discovered from my research, what I've discovered myself is that when there are constraints put in place, that's when we really discover new things. Now, there are two kinds of constraints. One is a good kind of constraint, I call them, right? And even a good kind of constraint may be budget, resources, time, but it's something where you're saying this is what we have, it's our reality, or this is what we're going to put in place. The bad kind of constraints that limit people and businesses are the bureaucracies, are the red tape, are the redundancies. And when those constraints, that holds people back. And so when people think often of like, we need to think outside the box, I often wonder if they're thinking, well, maybe we need to look at it from a different way. And that's not wrong. It's just that urgency to come up with something that's never been thought of before doesn't happen unless we know how far we can go.
You have a great metaphor in the book about children playing in the park.
Mm-hmm.
And we say to children, go and play in the park. You don't say children play outside of the park, because actually the park is the thing that gives us the boundaries, and it's a great metaphor, which is we in business, what we do is that we don't think outside of the box because of the boundaries that are in place, because actually we're scared. But if you actually have, but we know that the children will go and they'll if they don't want to play football, they'll go to the swings, but they will do what they want, what they find comfortable, and actually find their inspiration, even though we're still sitting within the boundaries of the park. Have I got that right?
Yeah. And the experiment, and it was just an experiment, but it's so fascinating around when they brought children to a park with no identifiable boundary. So no hedge or sidewalk or fence. The children stayed on the playground, never venturing into the grassy area. And they played the same way they played every time, the swings, the slides, the sandbox. But when those exact same kids were brought to a park with a visible fence that went all the way around that grassy area, they were much more creative in their play. They tried different things. If it didn't work, a game, they would stop it and start something else. And that's such a perfect business analogy, right?
Yeah.
That is so easy for us to go, oh, okay, I get it. Like if we put in the visible fence, once people know where the safety is, they
It's a
know where
psychological
it's
safety, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. And this morning I was actually listening to something and they were talking about and about how people invest their money and they look at the stock market and their investments and how we all feel like we feel the loss much greater than we feel a win, right? There's a lot of research about that.
Yeah.
And but the same is true when we think about taking risks in the workplace, right? We're going to feel losses much bigger than we'll feel wins. And so we have to take the feeling out of it and instead understand our capacity for whether it's investing or trying a small experiment in the workplace. And that only happens when people know where the edges are, when they know where the boundaries are.
So my next question was you write that when edges aren't clear, people actually hold back instead of creating. What does that hesitation look like practically inside the stagnant corporate culture?
Yeah. So what it looks like is there's a couple of things that we know that's happening today. And I know this from my research. I looked at a data set of 18,000 people across every industry. And what I kept finding over and over again is that people right now feel overworked. They feel like they have too much on their plate, that they don't have time to experiment, that they see solutions, they see problems, solutions, but they don't try them, they don't experiment with them. And the two reasons for that is that one, they're overworked and we know that. So we know that this is not the only solution, but that people need to be given time. But even if you give them time and you say we have a culture where we embrace experimentation, but we don't have the clarity around where they can experiment. They may wander, they may even try things, but they're going to go back to what they know works. And so in the corporate culture, if you have high clarity, to me, business will grow at the speed of clarity. And so
Yeah.
if you have clarity and the combination of like, we allow that experimentation and taking some risks, that's when you'll see it work. But when you don't have the clarity and you don't allow for some of that freedom, then you just see people doing what they always do.
How do you differentiate between a healthy constraint that sparks innovation and a bureaucratic red tape boundary that suffocates it?
Yeah. So oftentimes what we'll see is there are two things I often see. I see redundancies. So, things that people have to go through so many different circles and hoops in order to get something approved. And many of them are redundant. They don't need all of them. Yes, you need some. You 100% need to say, this is what we want to do, that the approval process, the checks, just to make sure that this is a good area for us. In fact, having that focus of what we should do and shouldn't do should be there. So I believe in those rules. But I am often seeing that the bad constraints happen when there's too many of those that exist, and you have all that red tape that people must go through, and then simply people are just exhausted and they have too much information, too much to do. And again, that's part of a leadership's job. A leader's job is to make sure that their team has some of that free time to explore ideas as well. So not giving people the time and having those redundancies are two of the bad constraints.
You write that innovation is often a numbers game. How do boundaries allow a team to safely increase the quantity of their ideas without burning through their budget or time?
Yeah, so it really does come down to little experiments, but I think there's another part of it, which is knowing what you say yes to and what you say no to.
Yep.
Right. That to me, I've experienced that as a photographer when I was in Antarctica. When I said, no, I am not going to do these things, that freed up time. When I helped a startup 25 years ago become the largest in its category and eventually become extremely successful, we sharpened our pencil in order to break on through. We didn't say yes to everything. Every small business could have been our customer, but we were very focused on that. So when you're taking experiments, when you're trying to, say, how do we take more shots and run more experiments? have the focus of the area so it is a numbers game, but make sure you have that focus around where you're going to run those experiments. Don't just make them, we can do anything.
The book highlights that the best ideas often come from the most unexpected people. How do clear guardrails level the playing field so that quiet or non-traditional voices get heard over the loudest people in the room?
Yeah. So one of my favorite suggestions is to have, if you are the leader or the most senior person in the room, speak last on an agenda. Like, it's so natural. And I'm the CEO of a company as well. And I often make this mistake myself. So I have to remind myself. But when you have a meeting, make sure you're the last one to speak, because otherwise people are just going to fall in line with your ideas.
Yep.
Second, the senior most person is often 3 levels away from the person closest to the problem, the customer, the patient, whatever industry you're in. And so making sure that they are empowered to run a little experiment and then provide some feedback before they bring that idea to you is also critical for this. So when you're present, be the last one to speak, but when you're not present, empower people to a degree so that they can run little experiments, because they're the ones closest to the customer or the patient or the client.
For leaders listening who think their team is ready to innovate but aren't sure, what are the signs of an organization that has a low innovation capacity score?
Yeah. So if you have low capacity, it could be that you're new to the market. So you don't have a strong brand presence. It could be that you don't have a diverse revenue area, so that if you try something and it fails, it could have a significant financial impact on you. There are a variety of different areas where you can look at what is our capacity to try something new, for it to fail and for us to recover. And so understanding that, I give this example that, like, obviously Amazon has a very high capacity for failure, but my local pizza place that's around the corner from me, they have low margins and they have a small area that they're going to draw from for customers. They have a low capacity for failure. They can do small things, but they can't do a major thing. So understanding your revenue, your capacity, your reputation, your diversification, all those things play into your capacity to take small or big risks.
In the book, you draw lessons from a polar expedition. And what can modern tech startups or association leader learn from a polar explorer when it comes to setting rules?
Yeah, so I've been on both ends of the earth. And one, when I was up in the Arctic, it was a complete failure. And when I was in Antarctica, it was a complete success. And there was a couple of big differences. When I was in the Arctic, I had too many options. I went up there with every single lens I owned. And today we're in a world where AI and technology and the tools say, okay, here, team, we have everything, go at it. And that could be overwhelming. And it's hard to keep focus on something. And that happened absolutely up in the Arctic.
You tell the story about, I can't remember which one, where you had the gloves and you had the camera and then people were getting in the way and.
Yeah, and I froze. I literally froze. It was minus 40 degrees. So I literally froze, but my brain froze and I couldn't think about what I wanted to capture and what I wanted to do. And there was a woman on the ship and she cut her leg the first day and the gash was so bad she couldn't stand very long. And it created a constraint that actually enabled her to get the shot of the trip, because she couldn't go down an icy ladder, she couldn't stand long, and she couldn't hold a heavy lens. And because of those constraints, she said, what can I do with what I have? And also because she's a great photographer, she got the shot of the trip and I failed.
Yeah.
The opposite happened when I was in Antarctica. I took a step back and said, what are the boundaries I put in place? I said, I'm not photographing anything with another boat, with other people in it, that anybody else is shooting. I'm out, because I don't want to do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And that freed me up to look around and say, where's our opportunity where no one else is looking? And that's when I captured this amazing shot of this whale that no one else got, because it freed me up to do that.
So I was actually going to ask you the question. You're an award-winning wildlife photographer. You've mentioned how patience, preparation, adapting to changing conditions matter in photography. How has waiting for a perfect shot in the wild changed how you view corporate risk and timing?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, I love that question. So, there is uh, most organizations hopefully are at a point. If you are competitive, if you're looking at growth and you want to succeed, there's a shot that only you can take. And it could be because of the value proposition you're offering. It could be because of timing. It could be because of something new you've created. And as a photographer, the thing that I've learned from that patience and that preparation is look for the shot that only you can take. Don't try to be what everybody else is doing. And when I do that, I succeed out in the wild. And when companies do that, they succeed. That's when they grow. That's when they stand out because they said, listen, we're not going to, boil the sea. We're not going to try to be everything to everybody. This is the shot that we can take and we can excel at. And real quick, I was talking to people in the sign industry, and there was this individual named Joe, and he told me he had invested tons of money in manufacturing signs, but realized they were much better at installation. And making that change from saying, you know what, the shot that we can take, where we excel, we're good at this, but we're great at that. And making that shift and shifting the business to that end up having year over year significant growth for the company. It's a hard move to make, but you're looking at what's a shot that only you can take and where you excel.
So can you walk us through how a team can practically use a framework like looking for the worst idea or exploring failures safely to discover corporate gold?
Yeah. So, one of my favorite experiments that I do with every size organization, any industry, is instead of walking in and saying, let's think outside the box, or what is your best idea, bring them forward, we will present a problem and I'll say, what are your 10 worst, most extreme ideas for solving this problem? And people laugh and they're not sure. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, no, no, no. There's a prize for the worst
Worst one,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's when they start getting really creative. That's a boundary. What
Yeah.
is the most extreme? We'll give everything away for free. We'll do this. And they have this whole list. And I'm like, okay, now I want you to look at that list and flip each of those ideas. What is the version of that that potentially could work? And then you see the smiles come in. They're like, I never would have thought of this version of that. But that frees you up to get creative. It puts in a boundary there and it actually helps you solve problems in a way you never have before.
So setting boundaries inside your own team is one thing, but how do you recommend a mid-level manager set boundaries upward with a chaotic or unpredictable executive who hates rules?
Yeah. I've seen this in startups. I've seen this in large corporations. I've talked to so many people that face that similar situation. The first thing I say is without the clarity, it's nearly impossible to do. So put together your list of questions where you need more clarity around, okay, well, what is it that we're not only trying to do, but who are we attracting? Ask for that clarity. Just ask questions that aren't rules, and you don't have to call them constraints or boundaries, but say what does success look like in these 5 areas? Give me clarity in this, and that will provide you with the boundaries or the constraints or the framework that you need to then have more focused attention to experiment and to do something different.
So if a leader finishes your book tonight, what is the single smallest, most impactful boundary they could implement tomorrow morning with their team?
Yeah, I would say that it is having that clarity around what you can do best. And it may not be just going back and rethinking, like, we're good at these things, but we're best at that. And that kind of clarity, that one little thing, you can go to work tomorrow and now have like a refreshed, new energy around, okay, we're going to focus on this because we're best at this. And this could be anything. It could be a program, product, service. It could be the delivery, right, that you give. And we know lots of business stories about what they're best at isn't the product that they sell, but how they sell it. And that authenticity, I know which speaks to you, Tim, because that authenticity of around like how do you actually sell things is really around what you're really best at and what you're authentic at.
Mm. So if readers walk away with just one core shift in how they view risk after reading The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, what do you hope the shift is?
to no longer talk about risk tolerance, but think about your risk capacity. So yes, a tolerance will always exist. I'm comfortable. I'm not at all comfortable taking chances, but I'm not going to evaluate the risks based on my comfort level. I'm going to evaluate it based on my capacity to fail and to come back, because I truly believe that failure is knowledge earned, and knowledge is power. So the more that we have, the more knowledge we have, we'll get that when we start taking those risks, but they have to fall within our capacity, not our tolerance.
Sheri Jacobs, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, The Unexpected Power of Boundaries, Rethinking the Rules, Risks, and Real Drivers Innovation. I really loved it. There's some great metaphors in there. And you tell it's partly autobiographical as well, isn't it, in terms of your story. So remind people, if I wanted to buy a copy of this, where could I get one from?
Yeah, you can get it from Amazon. You can get it on my website, sherijacobs.com. It will provide you with a link to a website, and all major booksellers as well.
And where can we find details about you?
At sherijacobs.com, which is SHERI Jacobs.com.
Excellent. Sheri, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about your book. Inspirational. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.